Find an estimate for 404.3331 divided by 19.7. Now, if we came across a question like this, we would, I suspect, be very tempted to just pick up our calculators, plug the numbers in, press equals, get an answer for it. It's a divide question. If we can get away without doing them on paper, all the better. They're both quite complicated numbers as well. We've got decimals here, particularly this first one, quite a large number, 404, and then the 0.3331, 4 numbers after the decimal place, quite a mucky number. Problem is, if we did that, if we picked up our calculator, worked out an answer and wrote that down, we would get no marks at all. Why would we get no marks at all? Because there is one very clear key word in the question, and that word is estimate. Find an estimate for. So with that in mind, find an estimate for 404.3331 divided by 19.7. So we only want a rough idea of the answer. We're talking about roughly working out the kind of size that the answer would be. So what we need to do is we need to take each of these numbers and we need to turn it into something that it roughly is. Estimating is a difficult thing. It's a difficult skill to teach because there is no exact science to it. You just have to rough it as best you can using your gut instinct of what will make for a nice question. The idea with estimating questions is that you rewrite one or both of the numbers so that the question would take you that long to do. You are deliberately setting up an easy question to do. It should be a question that you don't really need to do any extra working out for. Or if you do, it's a little bit of quick working out off to the side. And if you do have to write anything down, it should take seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this number first, the 404.3331. And we're going to say that, well, that's roughly 400, say. That seems okay. 400, hundreds numbers, nice rounded numbers, easy to work with. We're going to keep the divide because the question isn't going to change. 19.7, well, let's call that 20. Because it is pretty much close to 20. 404, we've roughed it a little bit more, but why have we chosen those two numbers? Because 420 will make for an easy divide. 400 divided by 20. Well, 400 divided by 10 would be 40. So 400 divided by 20, divided by twice as much, split into twice as many different groups, would give us a nice easy answer of 20. And the answer to that question should be roughly 20. Now, if we were to pick up a calculator and work out the exact answer, 404.3331 divided by 19.7, we would get the exact answer of 20.52452284 and then potentially some more. Which I would say is pretty close to the 20 that we have given as a rough answer. And our estimate holds up. Questions like this, find an estimate for type questions, generally speaking 2 marks, maybe 3, it depends on the actual bit of working out that you've got to do. Your first mark will come from having sensible numbers that you've written for your estimate. So either the 400 or the 20 would probably net you a mark. The second and final mark will come from actually doing this nice simple question that we've now rewritten and getting the 20 as a final answer. Now, this idea of finding an estimate is finding a rough answer. Not the exact answer, but a rough one to say the answer is about this size. But why would that ever be a useful thing? Because surely we're only ever going to want the exact answer. That's what maths is, isn't it? Maths is taking some stuff, some numbers, doing something with it, and getting exact, definite answers out the end. Estimating feels a little bit too rough and ready. It feels a little bit too much like guesswork. But there is a practical point for estimating. Imagine you went shopping and you spent this much money, £19.96. Well, when you got home and somebody said to you, how much did that cost you? What would you tell them? Well, you'd probably tell them it was 20 quid. Because as far as they are interested, they do not want to know that you spent £19.96 exactly. As far as they are interested, 20 quid will do. Estimating is good because it will give you a rough idea of what answers should be. Practical purpose? Well, seeing if you've got enough money. If you're adding up your shopping, if you know that your shopping will be less than 20 quid and you've got 20 quid, then you are fine. You know you can buy it. If you add up your shopping and you know it comes to roughly 20 quid, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but it comes to roughly 20 quid and you've not got that much, that's why the estimate is useful. It's also useful because you can use it to check answers to questions. Knowing what sort of size an answer to any given question should be means that when you get an answer that is roughly that size, there's a good chance it's right. It at least tells you that your answer is sensible. And whenever we do any question, asking yourself, is this answer sensible, is always a useful thing to do. We'll do one more. Find an estimate for 33.9 times 1.95 and then 6.79 underneath that with a line in the middle. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to talk about what this line means. Now what this line means is divide. As in, whatever is on the top, so 33.9 times 1.95, we'd work that out, that is an actual number, and then we would divide that by 6.79. And all this is, this one number or one thing over another number or another thing, with this line in the middle, all this is a different way of writing a divide. It's the top line divided by the bottom line. It is, in fact, a slightly more mathematically correct way of writing a divide. This symbol here that we recognise as the divide sign, and are going to use as the divide sign, doesn't tend to get used in higher level maths. In fact, where this symbol came from, this symbol is quite old. It's just an alternate way of writing a divide. It's been around for hundreds of years, but it particularly started to jump in popularity around about the time of the typewriter coming in. It used to be that divides were generally written in this way, pretty much exclusively. But trying to set that out on a typewriter with one line and then another thing underneath, and then that line in the middle, was quite difficult, so it became more necessary to have a single symbol. Sometimes people would use a forward slash, but the problem with the forward slash is that it can also mean either or. So if you're writing something like, say, 10 divided by 5, and you put a slash in the middle, is that 10 divided by 5, or is that 10 or 5? And it's a little bit ambiguous, it's a little bit confusing. Different people would read that in different ways. Whereas the divide symbol, this is unambiguously a divide, that is what it means. In fact, there is a certain logic to this symbol. If this line in the middle is the line here, the divide line, well, there would be a number on the top. We could use a dot as a placeholder to show that a number would go there, and there would be a number on the bottom, and we put a dot there as a placeholder to show that something would go there. For example, 10 divided by 5 again, where the dot on the top is a placeholder for the 10, and the dot on the bottom is a placeholder for the 5. And if we were to set it out in this way, we would have 10 over 5 with that line in the middle. And that means exactly the same thing, and either presentation would give us the same answer of 2. Well, bearing that in mind, our question is now find an estimate for, with that keyword of estimate. We do not want to work this out as an exact answer, we just need a rough answer to give us a size guide. Find an estimate for 33.9 times 1.95, all of that divided by 6.79. And again, we've got a little bit of flexibility as to what we choose to rough these numbers as. And different things might work out differently to give us slightly different answers. But we want to make this as easy to do in the final answer as possible. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this number on the bottom. I'm not going to start here this time, and it will become clear why in a minute, because there's an interesting point to make about this. 6.79. Well, it's 6 and a bit, but I'd say it's 6 or 7 would probably be a fairly sensible answer. Let's go for the 7 for reasons that will be explained soon. 1.95, I would say that's probably fairly easy to round to 2. Now, timesing by 2 is fairly easy to do. So the 33.9, we're going to rough that as something that's then going to be times by 2. Now, whatever we pick for the 33.9, timesing it by 2 will be reasonably easy to do. But then we're going to divide it by 7. So really, we could choose this very cleverly. We could choose this cleverly so that when we times this by 2, we then get something that divides by 7. Now, that's okay because we're just giving a rough answer. We are finding an estimate. So the number I'm going to pick, 33.9, well yes, 33.9 is very close to 34, but if I do 34 times 2, I get 68, which won't divide by 7. But we only need a rough estimate for the answer. So I'm going to say that 33.9, well that's actually still quite close to 35. 35 is a nice enough number, it's still fairly close. It's not like we're rounding it to something that's miles away, we are still roughing it to something that's pretty close. But then, 35 times 2 is 70, and we're going to divide that by 7, and 70 divided by 7 is 10. And we are saying that the answer here is roughly 10. And if we were to pick up our calculators, 33.9 times 1.95 on the top equals, divide that by 6.79 equals, and then we can press that S to D button to change the form of the calculator, and we get an answer, once we've turned it into a decimal number, 9.7356, and then some other stuff, 9.7, and our rough answer was 10. That seems like a fairly good estimate to me.